Recording in
Hello, everybody.
progress.
We got a special meeting this month. We have Matt Petrowski. Sorry, Matt. I'm sorry.
Close.
Oh, that's horrible. Matt Navarre. Yeah, we'll leave that in because I'm an idiot. Matt Navarre is joining us from Portland, and he's going to be hosting our throwdown competition between FileMaker do's and don'ts. And so we have a international group of so far 27 people and expected a few more here. So Matt is a longtime FileMaker developer since back in the 80s, and everybody knows him, and I probably don't even need to introduce him. But he's got the greatest title on his business card I have ever seen. For a FileMaker developer, his business card says relationship counselor, which I think is the ultimate FileMaker title. But anyway, so Matt, why don't you go ahead and take off, and I'll just keep here hitting the admit button as people join us.
All right, great.
Oh,
my
Doug
current
Gardner.
title actually has changed. It's now evangelist and trainer.
Oh, okay. How
With
boring.
Direct Impact. Yeah, since we merged AppWorks with Direct Impact back in February of this year. So
how's
now
it going?
Now it's going pretty well. I'm a contractor. I work part-time, study music part-time, and retired part-time until I can find the next venture. But yeah, I'm loving my primary role with FileMaker is training, teaching it to people, and I really love that part. It's fun.
Cool.
So, and then and doing events like this actually are also a big part of my job to actually kind of elevate the platform and come up with ideas where we can get 100 or a couple hundred people a month into some interesting thing. So we came up with this crazy idea to basically have a game show, and I figured it needed a FileMaker database, so I created a FileMaker database. And Vince Bonanno and some others helped. Eric Matthews did a ton of work on the UI on this To the Death database. So if you haven't already opened it, this is what it looks like. And this is how we're going to run the meetup to vote. So this database has all of the topics. On each one to vote, you click on the vote in the middle. And then you get 4 points on each topic to vote with. If you vote high for either one side or the other side, all 4 of your votes are cast for that. So right now there are no votes for either of this one. So if I vote all my votes for yellow, then I'll see that yellow gets 4 points and red gets 0. I can change my vote and change it the other way, and it will switch my vote the other way. And if I vote one of the other ones, it's 3 and 1 or 2 and 2 in the middle. Of course, 2 and 2 doesn't really move the score, but it shows whether a given topic has votes, people voting for it or not. And the idea is on each of these, you get to make a case. So we'll pick a champion from among the group. And basically, if you feel strongly about an idea or you want to argue the opposite of the idea, you make a case for a couple of minutes. We briefly discuss. It's supposed to be educational and fun. And feel free to insult me and others when I say something stupid, which is, not infrequent. And then I call a vote, and everyone casts their vote, and we move on to the next one. They should take somewhere between, 5 and 10 minutes per topic, something like that. Some of them go on longer. So let's start with the first one. Everyone just open up and pick a case. I'm going to say yellow is the better color than red, and Jonathan is going to argue for red. Yellow is a better color because it has 2 syllables, and 2 is the only prime number that is even. And there's not a lot of colors really that have 2 syllables. I mean, purple, of course, but red, being a single, it's just, Yellow is just better. Jonathan,
well,
rebuttal?
Red is better because it's the color of the University of Louisville, the Louisville Cardinals. And so obviously red is in the state, the University of Kentucky is blue. And so those of us in Louisville know that red is way better.
But red means stop, though.
It also means basketball championships.
All right. Okay. So you've made your case. Everyone can vote now. I'm gonna cast all my votes for yellow for the win. And then we'll go on to some actual topics. All right, so the votes are being counted. There's a little refresh button in the top too to force it to refresh. Oh, it's a tie, 12 to 12. I'm liking this. And if you don't have the link yet, hit me up in chat and I can repost the link to the database in chat.
Oh,
I think you spoke too soon, Matt.
Oh, is it not tied anymore?
Canada has now cast its vote. Guess what color Canada?
Oh yeah.
Canada's
And
voting
then-
red.
I don't know. Maybe I'm speaking for Jason also.
I see Doug Gardner just joined. Welcome, sir.
I got Joseph Ricciardi just joined.
Okay, so our first topic, set variable versus instantiate with let. So the idea here is when you're scripting, whether you want to write a script that has a set variable command for each variable you want to instantiate, or a single set variable command or some other command that invokes the calculation function that has a let statement, and you define actual variables as opposed to variables with no $ prefix to instantiate them when the script is running. Doug Gardner is going to take the instantiate with let.
I'm trying to get hooked up still. I don't even know, what does instantiate mean? No, I'm joking. I'm joking. I'm stalling as I try to.
And we're going to keep it.
I got the
We're gonna-
voting thing open.
And we're
I
gonna
always,
keep it north
I
of the
always,
49th
I always
parallel.
call it assignment, not instantiate.
Assignment. Instantiate just sounds fancier, so it's just a better word.
Except for instantiate means
Create an instance of.
create an instance of, but it doesn't necessarily have a value.
So it's not the
Whereas
right word. Is what you're saying?
assign, so assign, you have to actually put a value to have it be instantiated in your variable.
Okay, I'll give you
How
that.
about, what about
So-
declare? Declare.
Declare is good too.
Well, except that there's no declaring in FileMaker.
And it still has to have an assignment.
I do declare.
You have to give it a value to make it valid.
Yeah, because if you don't, you can't just say, hey, I want this variable like you do in other programming languages. You
It
can't
has to
say,
be
hey, I want a
assigned.
variable.
Why don't we use the word set? Like set.
Yeah. Set.
So who
Let's use set.
who's going to argue for which side?
Well, it sounded like Beverly was going to make a case for something.
Yeah, it does. Beverly, why don't you make a case for the set variable, and you can fight Doug Gardner, who's going to fight for instantiate with let.
Okay.
And Doug's a pushover, so you're going to totally win.
Yeah. Probably. I'm already ready, willing to concede, but you go.
You're talking. Why don't you make your case?
Okay, well, first of all, you could use a set variable with the let function to instantiate your variables. And that's something that I see people do from time to time. So you might have a set variable that's using a local variable as a way of instantiating a whole bunch of global variables, for instance. And I've seen people do that sort of a thing because all you really need to do is get access to the calculation engine to set those things up. But I don't see these things as being in opposition to each other. And I would love to know how many people here do it both ways, because I've certainly done it in both ways, just depending on the situation. If the variable has a single value, then I always go with the simplest direct set variable method. But if there are multiple values, then I'll go the other way. Doesn't matter to me.
Interesting. That's a very strong argument you're making.
Well, I'm not really sure what I'm
Doug and
arguing.
I are good friends. We can definitely do this. So don't think that I'm actually attacking him.
Yeah,
We'll
he's
do this
not
everything.
attacking me. Although I feel attacked.
I have to agree. This isn't really like this way is the best and the other ways don't do. But all the ideas here are really kind of situational. But I think the idea is, in most circumstances, which is better?
Well,
So
So I get to argue the other
Yes, you do.
side, right?
there you
go.
go.
Okay. Set variable as the script step is just one variable, although you can also instantiate or assign within that set variable. But if you have one step for each variable you set, it's much easier to see within the script layout, and it's when you're actually printing them, you can see them better. You can put in comments better when you do it that set variable than you can with just assigning them in a let statement.
Yep. I think that's a huge point, is the clarity. So it's basically clarity of code versus brevity.
Right.
So if you're setting 20 variables, a single line of code can do it with using the let function. But you have to go in one extra level of depth to do it. Whereas set variable, you can see everything right there, and it's got that extra clarity.
Can we have
So
conversation on this, Matt?
So if
Yeah, we can have a conversation.
if we rephrase that, yeah, I'm sorry, go on, John.
Thank you. I'm exactly in this situation now. I'm working with on a team of 10 developers on one system. And
Wow.
one of the coders has got real strong preference to instantiate or declare all the variables within a let function. And when I first saw, and it's done as a result of some complex execute SQL and some JSON parsing. And at first, all of that together seemed extremely cryptic to me because you can't see it. Although you can find it if you're using a search tool like to Empower FM to find it, because the variable name is declared, but it's declared within the let statement. So it's cryptic, but not completely invisible, but certainly you can't see it when you're looking at the script. But now they've asked me to build a very complex process logging technique where I have maybe 100 different scripts that all call the same variables because they're all stored and passed between each other. And now the brevity becomes more important than the transparency. So there seems to be a balance point at which if you're only going to do this in one script, in one place, I would vote for the transparency instead of the brevity and see all the declarations. But I have a situation where we might be declaring 50 variables. And that just kills the whole header of the script. So I go to brevity into one line and then give a legend somewhere to make it easy for the developer to find. And we haven't settled completely on that, but I see that the argument between brevity and transparency on this really is dependent on the environment you're working in.
Yeah, that's such a great case. I think faced with that situation you just mentioned, if you had 50 variables to declare, I totally would use a let function to do it, and then just make sure the users know that's how you do it.
Especially if it was repeated often.
If it's repeated, then you've got a situation where brevity starts taking precedence.
Yeah.
But are there any other?
Otherwise, my point is right up there with Beverly, is that I like to have my scripts be self-documented. And when you throw a bunch of set variables into a single calculation, then you got to open that calculation up to see them. Whereas if you can just look through the script and see them without having to open anything up, it's a lot more self-documented visually. So I prefer the former.
Yeah, when I develop, like if I use perform script with variables frequently with JSON, and rather than having a single line of code that performs script, and then you have to click into the perform script line to look at exactly what you're sending, I'll usually declare a variable just before the script.
Yeah.
For example, if I'm making a log entry and calling a log script, I'll make a variable called $log, and then the perform script step just sends whatever's in $log.
Absolutely.
And it's 2 lines of code, but it's one less click to get into the detail.
Right. Well, and it's self-documenting.
And it's
you don't have to add a comment line saying, this is what we're doing here. You see it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like set vars. If I may, I'd like to the monkey bread thing is mentioned in the chat.
Mhm.
The ability of the monkey bread software, as per Christian, to spell check your variables works if you use the set var. So I use set var, even if it's 50, even if it's 100, because it's all, other people have said it, two-dimensional plane. You don't have to drill down into calculation. It's more readable. And that's what I like. Set vars, although there's a super edge case where instantiating variables on the fly makes sense, but very rare for me over here.
Yeah, that's a little bit different angle to this, but because either whether you're using a let or setting them individually, they're both subject to typos. And
If
yeah,
you
the
if
set
you
var function.
set I'm not paid for this, unfortunately, but I'll say I do use the monkey bread plugin, and it does tell you when you make a spelling mistake. If you declare the variables in a set,
Yep.
it establishes that, and then if you use the variable, I don't know how you make a typo when you just copy and paste, but if you do, it shows up in red, and that could be useful to some people. Of course, not me, because I would never make that mistake.
I'm so thrilled when I can write a script with more than 10 lines of code and it works the first time through.
And I'm also using the code. It also gives a reason for code folding. It is a point that if you have 50 variables, it's kind of annoying, but who knows? Code folding would be awesome if anyone's listening. Hi, Clarice.
Let's see. Let's call for a vote on this one. Right now, it's actually 16-0.
Well, let's make it 100-0. Let's go, people.
Someone has to like using let in general.
I used to do it, and then I kept tripping over it, so I don't do it anymore.
I mean, if you're outside of a script, it's handy, but if you're in a script, then the let is just obfuscating.
Yeah,
that's a good clarification, Robert. Yeah. You're mentioning that it's in that area, button bars, whatever. That's a good point. But yeah, if you're in a script, what the heck?
And not that it happens often, but sometimes you debug that thing, you put it in your data viewer, and then you forget it's there, and then you run your script, and you're like, how come it's not having the value I want in my variable? It's running the steps right there. Yeah. And then you look at your data viewer and you're like, oh, delete that.
Hey, Matt, I just want to make a comment that if I click on the actual item on which we're voting that's in the white text, it ends up opening up a back-end window.
Oh, that's a nice bug.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the people who voted.
Yeah. The actual, like if I click on the word set variable in white, I get a new window opening up.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah, interesting. Huh? Maybe I got that master password.
I got a window popping up from time to time.
Yeah.
I
So
do.
you just have to hit the vote
I
button.
don't
think it's a bug. I think it's a way that you can document why you're voting the way you are.
Yeah, it says the reason, and you can put an image, text, or web page.
Yeah.
It's just a way to.
Yeah. I want to keep the thing simple. There must be some invisible thing there because I'm looking at the layout. Anyway, at the middle, click the green thing to vote.
Yeah.
And let's move on to the next one. Ooh, 44-8. Ooh, that's a good decisive one. I really like it when they're closer because it adds drama. All right.
I think I argued on both sides.
Did you?
I didn't put my full weight behind instantiate with let.
And if you think you had, it would have made any difference?
Yeah.
There's a transparency wins over brevity here.
You did make an excellent case that they both have their place. And for that, I really appreciate it.
One of them might be faster. The magical, hard to read code of using a let might be faster. That's the only, but I don't even know if that's true. And
you'd only run into that if in a like a long looping script. Yeah. I would think that would be the only place where
I'm just trying to help the underdog here. I feel a little bit bad for the let variable here.
I'm going to call that straight up academic.
Was that a play on word?
Yeah. I think Doug is going to be all right. He's not going to be emotionally
Oh,
scarred.
I'm
by
going to get
his
over it. I
lawsuit.
always set variable without using let if I can't, if it makes sense. I mean, that's
Wait.
my preferred way of doing it, just because it
Oh.
is clear. You can read the code. So at a glance, you can.
So you're the underdog?
Huh?
Is that what someone said?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Custom SVG glyphs versus icons and container fields. Tony, you were talking about this one, right?
Yeah, I'll try and be brief and kind of cue it up for people. And this is something that we've been dealing with. So the
And
glyphs
because this is,
came,
by the way,
sorry.
think about it as you describe it. I'm going to have you pick 2 champions.
Okay, so here's a real quick description. Glyphs came out in 14. Before that, a lot of us were doing icons. We'd have a resource table, we'd have a global table. System starts up, the icons, the images would be brought from resource to global, and we put them all over our system, multi-file system. 14 came out, we have glyphs, what are the SVGs or PNGs, and they're more portable. So I'm using more of the custom SVG glyphs, but anyway, that's the landscape prior to the debate, just to understand what the question is. And now what's this about picking people? I want volunteers. Pick a side. Anybody?
Custom
more-
SVGs.
Robert on
Okay.
SVG?
So Robert's got the SVGs.
Container fields.
Is that, did we get people on both sides? Did you get different people on both sides?
It's ideal, but you can have Robert fight himself.
I'll take the other side.
I'll try to go easy on myself.
Robert's very good on both sides.
Do you, Bev, do you want to pick a side here? Do you want container fields?
No.
All right, Robert, you want to go first, then I'll have home court advantage.
Sure. So the SVG stuff is great because you can have it respond to your states. You know, it can resize in a very nice and smooth way. You can color it. You can do a bunch of things. You know, so it's just great, and it's what it ought to be in the first place. I think relying on containers for this is just dated, basically. So and there's many great resources. If you buy a library of icons, then you got a bunch of things that you can just take and get into your solution right away. You know, whereas if you put an SVG in a container field, I'm not even sure that it's gonna resize properly if you ask it to resize. You know, so so I think that's most of that. Plus, you can even use conditional formatting to control like colors of different segment of a button bar if you don't want all of them in a button bar to be the same color. So you really have a ton of control with SVG, and I don't see a reason not to use it and keep using the container fields. I think that's it.
That's solid.
Well, yes, this will be a tough act to follow, but I'll do my best here. You make some strong cases there. Yeah, don't. But anyway, but it's not dry. If you put glyphs, whether they're SVGs or PNGs, they're not dry. So if I have like an icon to represent a copy button or a new button or a delete button or whatever, a copy button would be a good example, or a little find icon, the kind of thing that might be on a layout multiple times, might be in a file even more time. If I do it with a global field, that global field content exists once. I say, think of the children, think of the bandwidth.
Oh,
think of the children needing the bandwidth.
It's a double-edged sword. I mean, you could be using the same resource and then realize after the fact that in some cases you want to change the icon, but not everywhere. So it's difficult to foresee ahead of time. Like, there's no crystal ball that's going to tell you, yes, of course, you're going to, if you change it, it's going to change everywhere. And if we're lucky enough in a I don't know how distant future, but once everything is XML, you could potentially go into your file and start doing some replaces that will take care of that thing. So let's keep our fingers crossed.
Well, first off, I'd say you said there is no crystal ball. I'd say that we don't know if there's a crystal ball or not because we haven't found it. But moving past that, you mentioned colors earlier. One of the things that's nice about container fields is as icons is they can be very, very, very colorful, even though you do lose the what's that thing called? All the things you mentioned about the conditional formatting in the states.
And the resizing.
So what else did we cover here? It depends. I'll go with it depends. We've been moving a lot of things for to SVGs for code portability.
And for people who like the multiple colors, I mean, if they happen to have available SVGs that have multiple colors, they can use that. You know, for instance, if you have, say, flags, you know, I'm not sure you would use two-tone flags as SVGs. You'd use the actual colored flag to put in there, and it's just you would not color the thing over to say, oh, here's the different state and so on and so on.
Well, you just ventured into a whole other area, which is just using emoji, right? And emoji keeps expanding, and emoji is cross-platform and everything. And
well,
has
an
all
emoji
flags.
is text, so it's different.
Yeah, it is, but it isn't. It's actually resizable, you know, up to very, very large size, you know, vector artwork.
Yeah, but you can't use it in the same places.
Yes, you can.
Oh, yeah.
Emojis work absolutely everywhere in FileMaker. You can define variable names that are emojis. So you can have script names that are emojis. You can rename your file as an emoji.
JSON keys will accept emojis.
But you can't print.
They are just regular old
Yes,
characters.
If you save as PDF, they won't show up.
They're very versatile. You won't be able to have it change. Like if your object is changing state from hover to active or stuff like that, your emoji is not going to help you there.
I wonder if that's
a function. Someone just put, Jason,
I like
is there really a
emojis.
function called Get UUID emoji?
It was a joke, but yes, you could.
Oh, damn it! I'm looking it up right now.
You could make a custom function and make all of your keys based on emojis.
Jason, what is the limit of how large an SVG icon can be in a button bar?
Oh, I don't know exactly in points, but it's not very big, so it may not be practical to use for a logo in some cases if you needed more than, I don't know, like 60 pixels or something.
But is that just a UI limit? Like, could you open the XML and paste that back in with dimensions that suit your needs?
I'm not sure about that, but what you could do is you could render it in a web viewer instead of the button bar.
Of course.
Yeah, do SVGs even render in container fields? They don't, do they?
No.
How?
Yeah, they haven't historically. That has to be on their list.
That would be great if they could.
I know, duh. I mean, but because other vector artwork does render and resize perfectly well in container fields, like you know, PDFs.
But SVG is a web engine interpreted graphic.
Yeah.
The interactive container is a web viewer under the hood.
Yes.
It has a little bit of conditional logic to determine, for example, if it's a PDF, it just outputs it the way a browser would, whereas if it's an image, it packs it up into a bunch of CSS to handle your resize options and things like that. So
a container field?
The problem is it doesn't have logic. Yeah, interactive containers are actually web viewers under the hood. It doesn't have logic right now for SVG, but that would be so easy for them to deliver that. I don't know why.
Oh,
and you can put text into a container field with the SVG as a text XML. It doesn't render as XML SVG. It renders as text if it renders at all.
I'm sorry, Bev, did you say you can or you cannot?
You can put text into a container field.
I see.
Just copy copy text out of a text field and
Mhm.
push it into a container, and it's just fine.
Yeah, that's like when they decided to store encrypted text into a container field, for example. I thought that was interesting. And then you have to use a different function to get it back out as text. I can't remember the details. I think this is, do we have
as
enough
text?
info on this one for a vote? I think maybe we do. I think the strongest argument was using icons and containers is the way it used to be done. It's dated. That was pretty solid.
Yeah, I voted for SVG Glyphs.
Yeah, but I take that personal.
I think the only place really for a container would be if you need that global replacement. If they gave us that with SVG, I don't think I'd ever go back to that.
Yeah, like the other thing is, if you have a library of images that you like to use, you can bring them in all at once, just bring in a table. Whereas with SVG, you have to add them one at a time to a file.
That's
like
not true.
You can import a whole bunch of them at once.
Yeah, just put them all in button bar and drag the button bar to your other solution. Now you have them all.
Oh, that's right. They would all come in with the button bar. Oh, okay, good. That's a great
But you
idea.
have to add them to the button bar to begin with.
Yeah. So that you can your library file can contain your button
Is a
bar
button
with your
bar.
SVG.
Mhm.
And yeah, just
Yeah.
if you have a little find icon that you're pasting on a layout, the very act of putting a button that contains an icon, it does everything. You know,
Barbara,
it's
that
just,
hadn't occurred to me, and I love it when I get to learn things about FileMaker. Thank you.
you're working just in one zone. You're doing layout work, copy and paste a button from point A to point B, and it does everything that needs to be done.
Yep. Yeah.
But it's not dry.
Do we know
The
that
risk of showing my
once
ignorance, the SVG also has an advantage in that you can incorporate it in a style sheet with a button, right?
I don't think you can.
I don't know.
I think the
Ask Irvine about
style
that
of the SVG is, but I don't think the actual graphic for that button is stored in the style.
I think you're
Is it,
right.
Bev?
That's true.
It's
I
independent.
don't know. I haven't looked.
Base 64 coded, I believe.
Yeah, I think so also.
Oh, the nerd level is high in this room. I love it.
There's a bug in one example of a FileMaker put out of a SVG. The one icon would not appear on WebDirect. It would work in Go, it worked on client and everything fine, but it was somehow corrupted where that SVG just was not visible on WebDirect.
That's an
And
issue.
I even tried Todd's little SVG-inator thing and it still didn't fix it.
Yeah, you have to be really careful about the XML that's in that SVG. I've created SVG that's totally valid on the web, like a number inside a circle, but it can't be used as an icon in FileMaker.
I think that's my one rant for the SVG, that the path have some requirements to be FileMaker friendly and stuff like that.
Yeah,
But,
it's different.
I have
And
a
just-
membership to a graphics website called iconfinder.com, which is really cheap. You can get a minimum number of graphics for $10 a month, and you can get any kind you want. And if I select outline, flat, and just get black ones, and then drag those into SVGinator, Todd's site, then 90% of them render perfectly in FileMaker and will adopt the assigned theme style, rather.
Yeah,
About
yeah.
90% of them.
So you can colorize them and
Once in a while, there's one that has too many layers to it. And it won't capture, and it won't come in and adopt.
I agree with you. I'm just simply bummed that we have to go through a step like that, and like we are aware of it and it existing, but there are people who are just brand new to the platform, and they'll put things in there expecting them to work, and it's not going to tell them why something is not. So there's a possible disappointment there that I'd like to just get rid of.
Yeah, so there should be an
Agree.
automatic SVGinator in the
Yep.
in the mechanism. Yeah, that
Yep.
just
Nice
fixes it for you.
idea. Yeah, Jonathan. But icon
Just
finder has
render them.
hundreds of thousands. I have hundreds of thousands in the library that I can use.
I'm going to call for a vote, and we're going to the next one because the next one's going to be a big topic too. So please vote on this one.
Well, Christian
next
already
one?
settled the next one for us, no?
Yeah, I don't know. FileMaker Cloud versus custom AWS or other type of cloud. So we're not really talking about like on-prem server versus cloud server. I think we actually did that in a previous one of these conversations, and I don't remember the outcome. I should look that one up.
Does anyone remember the outcome?
Well, don't you want to have your own cloud or use someone's cloud, but FileMakers? I mean,
Yeah, so that's the
want to
idea
use a
here, right?
plugin.
So I historically have been a gigantic fan of roll your own AWS, right? Get your own AWS Windows server or Linux server. Get an account, build your servers. At AppWorks, we had around 80 or 100 dedicated servers that we built for clients. And it gave us way more flexibility and control and monitoring power than we could have gotten with FileMaker Cloud. And so at the time, that was definitely the way that I felt. FileMaker Claris is very much cloud first, as we see with the release of FileMaker Cloud 19.3 in the last couple of days, with some very interesting features, I think. So I think the discussion now is like, if you had it to do now, what would you do? Would you just trust that they're going to keep moving in the right direction and adding the right features and having the right performance and the right price, or would you roll your own? Who are my champions? Who are big hosting people here who build servers?
I don't know. I got out of the server business. I would have said build your own, but now the clients I have left get their hosting elsewhere, or they're in-house. And if they want to move to cloud, I always tell them to go with FileMaker Cloud because I'm not going to mess with it anymore. But that's not a good argument.
Well, I mean, when I was at AppWorks, I really wanted the hosting business because I loved making it really, really easy for my client. And FileMaker Cloud was really hard to do in the first versions, and it's still not as easy as it should be. So I love that I can have on the very first phone call, I'm going to go ahead and argue the case of doing it the custom way, and then someone else can counter me who knows more about FileMaker Cloud. I loved that I can, in one phone call with a client, find out what their server needs were, build a server on AWS because we had a template for that, come up with a unique domain name for them. So for example, if their company was ABC Technology, I could make abctech.app.works, go to my DNS and create a DNS record for it, bind it to their server, start the server, and they could email me their file and I could put the file on there. In an hour, I basically have their hosted system completely done. You could probably do that with FileMaker Cloud, but if they're new, they don't have a Claris ID, they don't have the account, they don't have the credit card stuff. There's all these other things you'd have to do. And I really loved that client service aspect of being a hosting company. That's definitely my soapbox platform there. Plus the central maintenance of it. So I guess I would ask, what are the features of FileMaker Cloud that are better than what I kind of just outlined for a client, for either for an individual client or for like a consulting company who wants to serve clients?
Well, there are clearly some items about FileMaker Cloud where it puts the responsibility on Claris, so depending on where you stand, there's a great deal of us who can roll out our own, okay? But if we say, okay, let's roll out our own and make it the customer's responsibility, sometimes they're not going to want to do that, or they're not going to have the skill set required to look at a bunch of things. So I think it really depends who you are. If you are a Claris partner, chances are you'll want to get in the space where you can roll out your own.
Mhm.
But if you're just like I was telling earlier, someone who is trying to put an SVG in your thing and don't know why it's not working, well, rolling out your own server is not for you. So going with FileMaker Cloud gives you peace of mind for a bunch of things,
Yeah.
from like security, backups, and easy setup. You click and you get going. And I know there's going to be more and more partners who will get to a very smooth experience where you fill out a form and you're up and live in minutes, literally. I'll be happy the more there is about that. But I guess it's just is all about for some of the specific items, where do you want the responsibility to stand?
So Matt did such a good job on his explanation. I'll bump up the cloud. It does seem to be a nice on-ramp. Like if somebody just walks into the FileMaker platform and maybe they don't know a consultant to work with, it does provide an on-ramp that I think is beneficial for the community.
Robert made a good point also that you can get all those things I talked about just with a direct FileMaker Cloud account too. And then, or with a hosting company. Like Bev, you were talking about, you don't want to be in the server business anymore. And
Right.
so working with FileMaker Cloud solves that problem, and it puts the responsibility on FileMaker. I definitely woke up in the middle of the night a couple of times worried about if my whole entire AWS account was compromised. Like if one hacker could take over all of our customer servers, that's a bad day right there. Times, that's not even a multiple of a bad day. That's like a
888.
Yeah. Yeah. Like did that happen to one of the hosting companies?
888.
Trying to avoid that today.
We're being
yeah.
recorded.
I didn't know about that.
There was a hack yesterday. It's now been recovered.
Wow. That was yesterday?
It was Friday, but declared on Saturday, and a lot of people were taken down in the community. It did affect that company, but they've got it back up, but I think some damage was done.
Yikes.
That's not to speak ill of that company, but there are a lot of people host there, and something did happen.
The thing is, that can happen to anybody. If somebody really wants, if a talented hacker really wants your data, they're going to get your data. There isn't any really meaningful security in this world. We sort of have to just accept that. It's unfortunate, but true.
And that's part of a hosting company's business. I spent considerable time just going through and making sure things were secure and changing things. And if an attack happened, dealing with it. The attacks change is the problem. It's not a consistent, you can't say I can do this and it prevents it from then on because it changes.
It's just an arms race.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think the real question is, why is it, like, what is it you're buying when you're buying one or the other? And a lot of the argument for custom deployment is, one, like control. You choose what happens, when it happens, and all those things. That's for sure. And it can be more cost effective, but it has, like, when we say cost effective, there's this embedded price that say, hey, you're in charge, so when we compare to something else where it seems like it's quote unquote pricier, well, are we factoring in all of those other aspects that we can say, well, it's offset, the responsibility is in someone else's hands, let it be a host or let it be Claris. So
I think the FileMaker Cloud is more for new people who don't need or want a consultant and just want to put in their credit card, go on this new experience and click a few fields on a table and start entering data.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's one other thing too that I didn't mention, which is the pricing. So FileMaker is around $900 a year for 5 users. Hosting with a professional hosting company is another $1,000 a year or so, including with FileMaker Cloud. But FileMaker Cloud has an entry level option where you can get FileMaker licenses and cloud hosting for around $900 a year. And that one is impossible to compete with as a hosting company. But it's like, 2 or 3
Files.
Users. It's 2 or 3 database files, or I don't remember what the limits are, but it's pretty small. But yeah, like Christian, what you were saying, for a small company, that could be perfect.
Is this feature parity? Aren't there some features not supported on FileMaker Cloud? I don't remember because we don't do it.
The Venn diagrams, it's not a subset anymore. So now that FileMaker is cloud first, there's features that appear on FileMaker Cloud that are not going to be in the main version maybe ever, but they're certainly not there now. I can't remember if it's like OData or things like that are going to be in cloud.
But that doesn't have to be FileMaker Cloud.
Pardon?
OData doesn't have to be FileMaker Cloud. It has to be Linux.
Right.
Yeah, so it's more tied to the OS than to like who's the service provider.
Well, FileMaker Cloud is actually Linux underpinnings, right?
Yeah.
And I'm looking it up. I think OData is available on cloud, but I got to check that.
Well, I can't remember exactly which features, but there was a couple of features that they added, features that I really wanted that you could not get with the quote on-prem version for a custom AWS.
I think that might be what is it? What's the data transfer tool called? The command line tool.
Data migration tool?
Yeah, the data migration tool. I think it's available from the admin API in FileMaker Cloud, and that's not available on premise.
Not yet.
Another thing to not yet. Another thing to consider with FileMaker Cloud, even though with under 10 users, the price is competitive, and like you said, hard to beat. There's also the fact that you're going to need a license for your developers if they're not on your team. So that can add quite a lot. Especially when you're at over 10 users, the cost really goes up with cloud.
Yeah, that's for sure. The pricing's straight up insane. Actually, when you get to a larger size compared to what you can do on building your own kind of thing.
Yeah, Matt, do you have any feeling in which way the trends are going? Here in the conservative Midwest, manufacturing organizations historically hated to give up ownership of their means of production. They would rather invest in capital to produce the goods and services that they have rather than lease it. However, AWS, as you know, made tremendous progress into the market to the extent that Amazon put a data center in Columbus, Ohio. But recently, with some of the issues with Unify, Ubiquity, their AWS network management service is getting hacked. I've received a lot of requests to, hey, can we do a private cloud hybrid with FileMaker and not select one of the major players in the cloud? Because of the, I don't want to say the politics of the situation, but the fact that somebody else that might not have their best interest at heart is now totally in control of their life.
Yeah. So
are you sensing any trends out there? Are people going to go private? Or are they going to stay the course with this argument between vendor selected clouds and third-party clouds?
In my experience, it was really an easy switch to get people to go off of on-prem and onto cloud with AWS with us. Like, we had a little bit of pushback, but once people understood it, it was a very, very easy sell to get people wherever they were in the country to switch to cloud hosting with us and to get over the fact that it's AWS, even if they didn't like Amazon. I don't know if that trend has changed lately.
Is that period behind us now amongst knowledgeable users?
It kind of does feel like it's behind us.
I'm going to take the other argument. I have clients that are super high security will never be any more than on-prem, never.
Well, that's a whole different thing, right? So if you've
Yeah.
got like our government client,
Yeah,
wouldn't really even trust Amazon GovCloud.
yeah,
But I've also had high security clients, doctor's offices that have an on-prem server in a closet that doesn't have a lock, that don't use encrypted files, that have a
Yeah.
backup drive sitting there. They're like following every single worst practice you can follow.
And still use fax machines.
And they believe that it's more secure because they can look at it,
With
but
the
they're not
password on a
recognizing
Post-it.
that,
With the password on a Post-it stuck to their screen.
very possibly, yeah. It's under the keyboard. Yeah, keep it.
There is an argument for the hackers from Russia and the hackers from Chinese probably aren't going to get into that closet as easily as they would into Amazon's cloud.
Unless you connect it to the internet.
I don't think so, Ryan.
True.
But trying to speak to some of what was raised in terms of concerns, if we think of, well, I don't know how recent, but was it OVH where they had a whole data center blow up in flames? And the thing is, they had said they've got like 2 different data centers, and technically they were like 2 different buildings on the same site, so like the fallback location was just right next door. So the fire kind of got everything compromised. And so cloud is just someone else's computer. So I think depending on events like those, you can get part of the population who will be somewhat fearful that there's too much concentration of some assets at the same place.
I think the funny thing for this cloud center was that some servers were labeled to be in one and actually were physically in the other one, because they just mixed the racks. That was a big surprise for some people, which got a news that they are safe because they are in the other part, but actually the server burned.
Wow.
So I'm a nonprofit guy, and I'll just put one argument for custom AWS that you get a significant discount on hosting fees if you're a nonprofit. Significant, like 90% plus discount.
With AWS or with Microsoft?
With AWS, I actually, well, I'm with AWS. I'm on Linux.
So how much are they paying you per month to host with them then?
I get 2,000, I think it's 2,000 or $2,100 worth of credits for $170.
Wow.
I can run a lot of servers all year round for that.
Yeah. Hey, I see Joey Grimaldi just joined us.
Hello.
Jojo.
In fact, I have an appointment at 11, so I don't know how long you guys are going to be going for, but I'll probably have to drop out here in a second.
I think another hour, but it's also being recorded.
Okay.
Your screen image says Rebecca.
Yes, that is my sister-in-law who uses my computer for her stuff. So, so she ends up changing her name on here, and then I just have to change it back. So
you don't look like a Rebecca. So.
You look a little like a Rebecca.
I'm actually changing to Rebecca. Little do you guys know.
Her.
I'm transitioning.
So then you're saying that if we start a not-for-profit hosting company, we can host with AWS for cheap.
Perhaps. I don't know the exact rules. I'm a 501c3, which does involve the IRS. I don't know if it's just not nonprofit, but
I guess if you can convince the IRS, the AWS doesn't care.
Correct.
Yeah, but I mean, it costs AWS the same money.
Sure.
For their multiple products that they offer for that are part of hosting. And Robert, you had made a point that the cloud is just somebody else's computer. That's true for a smaller hosting company. I don't think that's true for AWS. I mean, because every single thing that's part of a hosting there is a product. Like there's nothing that's not redundant.
Oh, I understand the redundancy. I mean, they have more infrastructure, and that's true. But it is what it is. It's hardware that sits somewhere. It's not quote unquote in the cloud. It's not.
And with FileMaker,
there's no magic happening.
And there's a single point of failure with FileMaker. You know, if you had other platforms, if it was a SQL product, it would be really, really, truly redundant and scaled and replicated and all that, which you can't do with FileMaker. But anyway, so we've got a lot more topics. I think this is a good enough one to call for a vote now. And I see we already have people voting on the next one as well. So let's vote on FileMaker Cloud versus custom AWS. And go on to separation model versus single file. We'll pick a couple of champions on that one.
So FileMaker Cloud versus AWS. There's also a third option there.
Hiring a professional hosting company?
Hiring a professional hosting company, because
that's actually part of that one. So basically it's FileMaker Cloud versus all the other options, not including on-prem. Okay. So roll your own or hire a professional hosting company is definitely part of that one, which I listed on the argument. Oh, you don't see the database though, but. Hey, but I'll send you the link and you can vote.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, I have to drop off, but yes, anybody can resell AWS services. Obviously, we don't do that. We manage all of our own hardware, but it really counts to do your due diligence and look at what kind of hardware they have. Yes, it is somebody else's computer, but what their redundancies are, where their multiple data centers are, like you were saying with this fire situation, which is really, really sad. And it makes me angry actually as a provider, but because that's just stuff that should just not happen. But it's silly. Anyway, I'm sorry I had to run so soon. I'll check back when I'm done with my appointment, which is going to be in about like 30 minutes. So I'll check back and hang out with you guys.
Yeah. All right. Good to see you.
And Matt, just to your point also, when you said someone else's computer and so on, I think my point is not that it's not cloud. My point is just that when it's sold too much as it's in the cloud, you don't need to think about it. It makes it sound like it can't fail, you know?
Right.
And the thing is, that's not completely true.
It's definitely not true.
Ask the customers of AAA.
Yeah. So the truth is it's highly unlikely that it will fail, you know. But I think just this year there was something where like all of the services from Google, you know, they all went down. It was total blackout, and it was not like a 5-minute thing. So being above and saying it can't happen,
I know a couple of years ago, a major part of an AWS data center in Virginia was down for half of a day. And it even included S3, which is supposed to be super redundantly backed up.
Yeah, the Titanic sank. So basically, it can happen. It's not necessarily likely, but you have to think that it's part of the picture and that you have to still shield yourself in some ways.
No, I would say it's very likely. Actually, I would say it's a certainty that at some point your cloud-hosted FileMaker solution, the way that it's structured right now, is going to have downtime that's unplanned, because it's still running on one OS. It's one instance of one server on a server, every single line of code of which was written by a human, and so it's going to fail in some way.
Right, but the IP is still in your control, right?
Yep.
Whereas the IP isn't in your control in AWS, either through a nefarious third party or a willful intention by the providers.
Yeah. So this one's looking like an interesting vote. It's 45-7 in favor of custom AWS or using a hosting company. Let's go on to separation model versus single file. Yeah, now I'm all like riled. This is supposed to be calm and fun and educational, and not supposed to be, there's not supposed to be any fighting aspect to this. And this is another one of those topics that's been a really big fight kind of over the years because of people doing it wrong.
I think you're exactly correct, Matt.
That's right.
Yeah, but which one is wrong?
Well,
because there is clearly only one way, and that one way is, Jason?
Why are you looking at me?
Stephen? Either one?
Separation model.
That way is the right way.
Absolutely not.
I would say neither of the above. Really.
Yeah. All right, well, you two are going to fight
I mean,
then.
you've left out multiple files, segmentation into multiple files. I assume by separation model, you mean traditional separation model where you have a data file and a interface file, which I personally think is kind of obsolete now with the data migration tool. But there's still lots of reasons to have multiple files for performance, for the size of your backups.
Yeah, I think that's a good observation, Jason, that my business is predicated around a lot of small accounts where, you know, to me, a 50-hour consultancy is a big deal. So you're doing a lot of legacy stuff. And you can use the separation model sometimes to grab a hold of that very messy old data, build a separate interface for them. The customer falls in love, and everything seems to work fine.
Oh,
But
so
when
you
I
just
take
leave
on-
all the old files as data files.
Right.
And with all of their obsolete layouts and scripts and custom functions and junk.
Lousy relationship graph.
I like that. And yeah, leave their ugly relationship graphs alone too, but everything still works. You can still call scripts there if you need to. Yeah, that's a good way of doing it.
So I would say, yeah, instead of separation model, it's more of separation of concerns is how we see it. And so it's like Jason was saying, it's more an MVC type of model than a data versus UI thing now. That's how we work.
Yeah, that's a very interesting way to think of it. I like that.
And Jason was also correct that sometimes you have more than one data file because of the backup issue. Something that doesn't change, but you know, once a year does not need to have every 15 minutes be backed up.
Yep. Log files, image database files, things like that can be separate. One of our customers has multiple 200-300 gig data files now, because it, you know, just their system grew insanely.
Yeah.
How are they holding up, Matt?
Well, much better lately. Yeah. Having gone through some really serious pains with that.
You pulled all the calculations out of the schema?
Calculations, unstored calculations, that's coming up in our debate, don't really take up any space. They don't make a file larger. Stored ones certainly do, but.
Well, I mean, performance.
It's just the dependency chain can grow if you're not very, very careful, right?
Performance-wise, we took unstored calculations out of the schema from the very onset of the large things. So on the separation model one, Barbara, I really like I want to hear more about that approach, because I've always thought about the pivot point on this argument was whether you needed to actually do development in a dev environment and then post a new interface file. So it was a very functional decision whether to use single file or separation, but you're kind of giving it a different, like MVC, model view controller, or a different.
I work for Todd. This is not my thoughts. So please, you know, this is Carbon. So that's what I've been doing for the last 3-4 years.
Okay.
I can't think any other way anymore. I'm happy to champion this separation model thoughts. If you like.
You would use it for most solutions?
Almost all. I think the only time we do a single file solution is if we are doing a mobile file that is going to sync. That mobile file is usually very limited in functionality. That would be one that would have data UI all in one thing. But other than that, yes, anything else, our systems are quite complex usually, and quite so we do separate it out, multiple UI files, a controller, a data file, sometimes multiple data files. Yes. And then we use Auto. So it's, you know, we're all in dev and then push to production.
I have an alternate consideration is I did a separation for a client who is in the field, and I want to say in the field, literally in the bluegrass field, where the internet was not always the best, and trying to download that interface each and every time that they went to the solution was painful. So we moved it separated so that just the data was on the server and the interface was on the laptops. and it was phenomenal.
I
Just
haven't done that mix.
huge,
that
huge
deployment.
difference. And so, you know, we had a method where if the things were changed, they got a place to download the new interface, but very, very much difference in how they worked and how they could work.
Fabio, are you there? I've seen some awesome work from you. What is your opinion on this? Are you available?
Hi, Barbara. Yeah, I'm available.
Bonjour.
I
¿Cómo
always
está?
stay with the data separation model.
Say again?
Can
I
you
use-
define your separation model though? Like, because
So-
we've already talked about two.
So the difficult things is to understand what is the line that define which is a file dedicated for a model. I used to create solution where I have one UI file with all the script as a controller and different files for models. And that's it.
You haven't adopted a controller, Fabio?
No, because I think that you add too much complexity in some solution. Per se, data separation models is complex compared to the single file solution. And add a new layer just to handle the controller and separate it to the UI, for me is, it's too much for me. I don't like the idea. I prefer to have this UI plus controller file that has all the related configuration relationship just to represent and interact with the data, and have all these files for the model separated by context. For example, invoices, notes, or I don't know, PO, resources. This is the way I usually create custom apps.
I'm going to agree with Fabio. I don't have a separate controller. Because FileMaker is so highly integrated, the UI and the controller are really one and the same. It's not like the web where you can actually have separate controller documents that say, you know, go always to the index and then branch to this page. I mean, you can, but it's just not as elegant, where in FileMaker, it's designed to be integrated. On the web, it's much easier to do that final separation.
It depends. Like if we're only having, if we know we're only going to have one UI file, sometimes that UI file has a DB transactions table in it. So it's an embedded controller.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're going to do a couple of UI files, like a phone UI, and it's not a syncing solution,
Mm-hmm.
you know, then we will definitely have a separate controller. We want all our business logic in that file, not in the UI. So yeah, I think it's made complexity so much easier for me.
You don't work on small single like customers, or do you work only on larger, more complex projects?
Yeah, for the most part.
Okay, that's lucky.
Sometimes.
I work on some of the, I kind of have more of a smattering. So like from my work that I do, I've got some customers that have honestly flat databases, really little tiny ones that I just like them. So I work on their thing. Or small ones that are single file solutions that are used for 5 or 10 or 15 people. Oh, yeah. And then large ones with 25 developers that have been in steady production for 11 years. Mm-hmm. And have, you know, very, very large development budgets. And obviously the needs of those are completely different.
And I think you make a point there, Matt, because technically speaking, I don't think, like to Barbara's point, I don't think that having the separate controller file is a requirement. It's just if you are starting something and you know it's going to scale better. You know, if you already have a system and you try to retrofit that in there, then it's gonna ask you a lot of work, and chances are there's already a ton of things in the existing system that are going to circumvent the controller anyway. So you're not going to get all the things that you want out of the controller. But if you are starting fresh, I think in terms of how well it can scale, it's great, and all your logic is centralized. So I think there's great advantages for that.
Yep.
To that point, Robert, one of the first things we do when you take over a project is add a controller. So
move all your business logic there.
We get away from their convoluted scripting as quickly as we can.
I'm almost afraid to ask the question because I know it'll turn into a big deal. How do you do, can you in 24 words or less describe how you do the credentialing for multiple files that easily? You know, when you get a new user, how do you set it up?
Authentication.
External authentication.
External authentication.
Yeah, but see, if you don't have that option, that's a non-starter.
You can build.
Good question. You don't have that option.
Oh, if it's
local
AWS
accounts
hosted,
on the server.
You can totally do it.
If it's AWS hosted, that's definitely an extra hurdle to jump through.
You don't have to use external authentication. We have some big clients for which we do not use external authentication. We're talking Fortune 1000. It's not the only way. It's an awesome way. We have clients who use external authentication. We hear a lot about it on the forums and whatnot, and it's great. It's awesome. Go ahead and use it. You can't always use it. There are other ways.
How about authentication for just the data file?
Well, let me explain. Let me fill out what I'm saying here, because I hear this a lot. It's actually one of the things I put up on a blog post on FM Soup, external authentication versus native authentication. So FileMaker Claris gave us some script steps. They're there. Add account is one of them. Okay, so they exist. And I got to assume that they exist for a reason. I think Claris is a great, smart company. I don't know what you guys think. You can take the other side of that one if you want. And so we built and we ran a little beauty contest between external authentication model. We data modeled it out and we looked at the system that we built, which has the ability to, it takes about 60 seconds to add a file, add an account to the system, assign it to a role, which inherits a collection of privilege sets across multiple files, click a button, and that individual gets added to the file, to 50 files, let's say, with the appropriate privilege set for their role, which is not always the same privilege set, it's specific. And so then we compared it with external authentication and it came out equal. The difference is that we're not dependent on an externality. We're not depending on having the availability of an external authentication server. So I would just say they're both great. But there are at least two ways to do it. And even if you're using external authentication, the ability to kind of bootstrap your way into external authentication using the built-in script functions is good.
I can hear if Stephen was still on here, we would be able to hear his eyes roll back in his head.
Well, there's advantages to external authentications, but it's not this or that. It's just not. It's this and that. I mean, FileMaker ships features into the platform. What are we going to ignore them? Think of the programmer who worked hard on that feature.
Yeah, we got to keep him happy. Got to make him feel like he was worth something.
Anyway, we use both.
Yeah. I think the
It
valid
depends
thing
on the
is
security policies that are required.
Let's call for a vote on this one.
Oh,
I added another topic.
Actually, can I just say one last thing? Is that
One last thing.
Well, I was my separation is I do a lot of the SQL backend with a FileMaker Pro over UI to do quick and dirty stuff, and it's kind of a fun. It's not fully functional, but it is an interesting separation. But I still don't use a controller. I just throw the UI on the tables.
By the way, closing thought on the topic. As we're discussing this, I think there's actually two topics that get kind of conflated. One is the idea is if you have a system, are you going to have a single file with everything or many files, split your contacts from your invoicing and so. And then the separation model, which is a different kind of split, a different question, I'd say, which is how are you going to split your logical implementation, which would include the data and the UI, which is traditionally what's split, or perhaps, some 3-lever thing where you've got the controller file in the Carbon, which I've looked at. And I think these are valid questions. I do just think that there's 2 questions. And by pulling them apart, you get better analysis of the choices.
That's true.
Absolutely.
I added another topic right after this one. Claris is a great smart company versus not.
Okay, let me vote. I'm going to vote
Yeah,
smart.
so we can all vote on that one, and let's make that one really quick because I completely loved how you phrased that.
I'm not
So
seeing
awesome.
that one. Oh, there we are.
If you refresh, so a separation
There we
model
go.
is winning 25 to 19, 29 to 23. Ooh, I love it. Claris Great Smart is getting some interesting votes here too.
By the way, before I vote, are these votes anonymous or not?
They're anonymous.
They'll be
Okay, good.
reported.
But you do have a back-end tracking system for this.
I do have a back-end tracking system, but I don't look at it.
Encrypted.
Are we talking Claris technology or marketing?
Oh, yeah, not their marketing.
Oh.
Oh, please don't make me talk
Is
about
the
their
file
marketing.
encrypted?
Marketing is getting better.
Slam.
Marketing's getting better.
The database file to the death is not encrypted at rest. I will confess that.
Uh-oh.
All right, we'll pretend we didn't hear that.
Going to get hacked
But
by the
there's-
Chinese.
But there's only 2 people with full access accounts, and that's me and Jonathan. So,
And you know that you can't trust that Jonathan guy.
No.
Yeah, I'll turn his account off.
So 2 failure points right there.
Maybe I'll put another vote in. Should we turn Jonathan's account on now? Because he can turn mine off right now too, just as easily. Okay, next topic. After Claris Great Smart. Oh, this is not going well. It's actually.
Oh, no. Matt.
It's
I think we need
tied.
to hack the back end quick. This is being recorded.
Well, what I love about you gave them like example, like, hey, they gave us this script step. Why don't we use it? Well, they also have an if function, which I don't ever use. And they also have the ability to use copy and paste data instead of set field and set variable, which I used to use back in 1988, but not since then. So there's a whole bunch of
that's a
things.
fair point. I mean, there are features that do go legacy. I can just say, we built initially for FileMaker 9 the system for good story for a client with 120 files, 5 divisions within the same company. So we had to come up with a data model was basically a tool that abstracted the concept of a role from the concept of a privilege set so that we could put people in at different levels, because we had 6 divisions and with different levels. So we rolled that out prior to some of the more recent technologies that implement 2-factor authentication and so forth, which once again are also great. But I just think it's important to not only focus on the latest features when there's massive use case. Plus, if you already have this tool, you tend to use it. And we do walk into clients where they don't have the infrastructure of external authentication. It just doesn't exist. So we just, boom, we're done. We just, we set them up with our system and they're done.
Don't they have a server? They're not serving these files? It's a local file?
We have all kinds of clients. We have clients. I'm familiar with the different methods of external authentication. I'm a little less familiar with some of the new things that keep coming down the pipe. But we're certainly, with what's that, Microsoft external authentication, the Macintosh
Active
had their
Directory?
thing, and you could do local stuff on the server. I'm certainly aware of all those different things.
Oh,
We look
okay,
at
because
them.
I was wondering why wouldn't that be an option, Tony? You don't
It
have to
is
go
an option.
Azure.
It
You don't
is
have to go
absolutely.
Google.
A good friend of mine once said, what we need in this world, not just the FileMaker community, but the world in general, is we need people to say frequently this and that versus or,
Which is like against the whole entire exercise today.
It's very subversive, right? Okay. Yeah.
Hey, somebody mentioned copy and paste, and if I may,
It was me.
May I tell a story?
A quick one, because we got a whole bunch of topics to get to,
I
man.
just surprised the heck out of myself using the copy step in a
Really?
solution where I was allowing them to store Word files in the document using Scribe to do mail merge type things where they could put in a merge variable. So I would pull up a window next to the Word document when they went to edit the Word document, pull up a window, a FileMaker window where they could actually click on a merge variable and it would copy it so that they could then paste it into the Word document. And it was the first time I'd used copy in a million years. So anyway,
that's the time I use it is bits of text from a field. But back in the day, I was talking about like whole entire,
layouts.
Yeah.
Because it didn't have set field. Well, it's like repeating fields. It has its uses.
They do.
Yeah. My
Okay.
last use for reading fields disappeared though. Next topic, WebDirect versus building a web app with PHP Data API or some other method. I think, I don't know if I want to go into like,
is John
the
still
features
here?
on this one? Pardon?
John is here.
John is here. Let's go,
Oh,
John.
I'm here. I'm holding out to vote to argue on the side of something else.
Oh.
Yeah,
you want to get me in on WebDirect?
John's the WebDirect guru.
I don't know about that.
So
I'll talk to both.
Okay, well, I'll set some questions up for you with WebDirect because I would love to use it for processes. I want a public-facing FileMaker development environment where I can give a web page to a client where they don't have to have licenses, where they can go to a simple page and it just works on whatever browser, and it doesn't expire after a little bit. And when the session ends or whatever and they're done, it takes them to a really logical place. WebDirect is almost all the way there. And because there's so few limitations in the development now. I mean, now that we've got card windows and the ability to export and import and PDFs and sending emails and all the other things that it does are just so
better
amazing.
performance.
And performance is great. Yeah, until you get to, a couple hundred users or 100 users or something. So John, make your case for WebDirect.
Well, you can use PHP files to log someone back in when it times out or logs out by mistake. I just had a discussion with Robert Holsey last week, and some of my 4-page list of requests for enhancements to the tool. So I do recognize a lot of limitations. But I would like them to build in what I'm now doing with PHP files for dynamically redirecting people in and out, so that depending on what record and what layout you're on, when you log out or time out, I can send you out wherever I want you to go. I need PHP files for that or some external coding. I can circulate it so when it logs out, it automatically sends you right back and can keep you logged in forever or force you out. So you can use some peripheral technology to extend the serviceability of WebDirect to be, not like open code HTML and JavaScript coding, but pretty extensive. I've got systems out there that, as Jonathan knows, that work out in the open domain when they're licensed through the company that holds it, run on a site license for FileMaker server, because that does kind of not follow under the same guidelines as the seating arrangements for FileMaker client. The development requires virtually no HTML knowledge, except for, like I said, a few external files you need to have to control the in and the out. But since it's progressed so far now with card windows, you can design something in FileMaker, and with just a little bit of skill around knowing what to look for in WebDirect, you don't have to have any fancy skill more than, a moderately advanced FileMaker developer to build great web accessible sessions. I've done quite a bit of it and people love it. They can be beautiful and you can change things on the fly while people are logged in, like you can in FileMaker.
Yep.
Every commit to a layout will render instantly. I took it to Germany and presented something in Germany, and over the internet, over an AWS server in California, and I showed it in FileMaker and I showed it in WebDirect. FileMaker was dog slow, WebDirect was instant, even over the other side of the world. The performance can easily be like 10 times better than FileMaker Pro Client, and you don't need to design websites. So it's a great way for someone who's not real web skilled to deploy something out in the open market with a small amount of skill enhancement to their current FileMaker development skills.
So then
Is
the
it
only
still a
issue,
sorry,
like licensing is my question there.
that was my question as well.
I mentioned it subtly. The licensing, if you look at the site license agreement, it does not include FileMaker Web Direct under the same license constraints as the clients. It just depends on who owns the software. And if you're like leasing the usage out to people, you can do that, but you can't just sell systems and then host them for somebody else. There's a subtle variation to the site license agreement that works, but
Right.
you have to honor it.
I'm pretty well aware of it. So basically, if you have like if you sell a site license to a company, and correct me if I'm wrong, if anyone knows more details in this one, and the company has employees, contractors, and public users of your solution.
Yes,
if they're
their
FileMaker
solution.
Pro,
Of
yeah,
their
of the solution, one solution. If they're FileMaker Pro licenses, all of them are named users, and they have to have a license of FileMaker Pro, and they would count as part of the number of people in the site. If they're WebDirect users, only the first two count as users. So if they're employees or contractors, you have to actually include them as an employee or whatever of the company, of the 50, which is the smallest site license you can buy.
For contractors, you only need to count on-site contractors that use FileMaker Pro.
Run it by me again?
You don't have to count your contractors who don't use FileMaker Pro or contractors that are off-site.
Oh yeah, that's true.
There you go.
That's true.
Everybody else could be anonymous users.
Alan can chime in.
And that could be
on
hundreds
this.
or thousands.
That could be 500. It could be 500 if you have five servers running, because I believe you're constrained by the technology to 100 WebDirect sessions per server.
It's 200 now, right?
Right.
What?
I think it was increased to 200 in 19.
Was it?
Pretty sure. I don't know if that means it's 1,000 with 4 workers. I'm not 100% sure on that. But the other thing about a site license is you get a master server for every person in your headcount. So if you buy a 25-seat site license, you can set up 25 servers, each with 4 workers. You can support tens of thousands of users.
I didn't know that. That's great. Site license is the only way to go in many situations.
Absolutely. Site license is essential to WebDirect.
Yes.
There was somebody else here who left with Chris, who knows specifically about it.
Site license is good for a small company, but not for a large company, because you have to do the entire headcount of the company.
Yep.
Or a school.
Yeah, school.
Or a small division of a large
district.
company. We'll kill it.
Can you do a divisional site license still?
Yeah, it's hard. Really hard.
Really?
Yeah.
What
you
do
have
you
to
mean
fight
by
with
that?
FileMaker licensing.
So what's the exact scenario, simply so I can understand it, where you can have several hundred WebDirect customers and 5 FileMaker Pro licensees?
One standard site license for the smallest site license you can get, which is $1,900 a year.
Right.
Or $1,300 if you're nonprofit. Where the public WebDirect users who get in without a username and password can just access the file and do what they need to do as though it's a regular website. I'll editorialize a little bit. I think this is the biggest. Pardon?
The outside users can have accounts. That's also allowed.
Right. Yeah, they can. That makes it harder, but it's certainly a doable thing, because it's hard to have them auto sign up for an account. Although I think we build a system like that as well, where the first time they access it, they want to be able to get an account for themselves. They can follow a script logging on as an anonymous user that only allows them to create an account. That account sends them an email. They follow a link and type a code, which then authenticates their account as real. And then they actually have a real account in the file, kind of a thing. We built that sort of thing.
You were going to editorialize there, Matt?
So I think the biggest issue with FileMaker and with many of the other platforms like Airtable is there's not a very, very quick development environment that I can then deploy to the public without a bunch of hassle. I really, 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 really want to be able to spend, even if it's $5,000 a year, a WebDirect license that's just completely open to the public and I don't have to jump through all these hoops to not have the page expire with custom PHP code. Like, actually, I'm very excited, John, that I can do that, and I want to talk to you about that.
Have you had your discussion for your desires with Robert Holsey's team?
Pardon?
Have you had a discussion with Robert Holsey or his team about these?
No.
I would encourage it. He's taking he's having meetings with different developers. He did with me last week, and I know he's doing with a number of people. It's a discussion about how would you like to extend the capacity, the ability, the feature improvement of WebDirect. He's on a campaign to collect information and see what their plan is.
I mean, I'm at a place where, like, I've done everything in FileMaker world, right, in my career. And I'm frustrated by the scale, the limitation of scale. How do you deploy a great idea to 100,000 people? And if you don't want to write, you know, I'm old. I don't want to learn some other way of doing it. I don't want to use a distasteful. I don't want to use something like PHP or Python that's kind of backward looking, even though they're maybe solid and great. I want to use what I know, which is FileMaker, and be able to deploy it on a very large scale. And I don't see a way to do it, and I don't know what other platform can do that for the next phase of my career, you know?
The low-code way to an enterprise website.
That's exactly it. A low-code way to an enterprise website that doesn't have a crazy expensive pricing model for the public users.
Yeah.
Matt, I think the answer to that is FM Better Forms. I think you should look at that.
You know, I think you might be right. I've been talking to Jesse Roberts, and he's got a really large solution with FM Better Forms, and it's amazing. And it uses the XML gateway to FileMaker, which is free, right? Doesn't cost extra stuff. And it's PHP based, right?
No.
It's not?
XML API can be used with any web app that can read the XML. It doesn't have to be PHP. Just the XML API.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of technologies involved in FM Better Forms. It's, you know, mostly under the hood, right? It is a service that you subscribe to. It uses Vue on the front end as far as a JavaScript framework, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on there.
But it still allows you to take advantage of your FileMaker knowledge and skill. And
yeah, there's some things you have to learn, and there's a little bit of a learning curve for sure. But once you get comfortable with it, you can build pretty sophisticated things pretty easily. And yes, you do use a lot of your FileMaker knowledge, because everything that you do in Better Forms goes through a FileMaker script. So that's where all of your, well, not everything, you can do things strictly on the front end, but most of what you do ends up going through a script. And you don't have to set up all the stuff that you typically think you would do with an XML or a data API integration as far as layouts and all that stuff, because it's all scripts in and out, and it follows a path, and you mutate data and send it back out.
The challenge with that, though, and I think to Matt's point, is, I mean, FileMaker bears some responsibility for allowing us to create solutions to begin with. And I think they bear some responsibility for maturing to the point where you can grow, where, you know, it's like my crazy brother says, if money can solve a problem, it's not a problem. And FileMaker's artificial constraints on limiting the size of their product and the markets that they want to address is maddening. I find maddening at times. FM Better Forms and other things like that are great, but it's like a good friend of mine here used AppleScript to build a highly integrated solution with FileMaker, and it just, you run into a point where you've built something that requires a lot of maintenance all of a sudden. And
how many Band-Aids can you put on it?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think Stephen and Matt, if I can chime in, have kind of addressed the problem with FileMaker as a whole, as a barrier to entry. This August group can't really decide or understand all the complexity in FileMaker licensing, even though they tried to simplify it, and also the restrictions that FileMaker imposes. If they want people to latch onto their product, they've got to come up with some solutions that doesn't make this whole process so convoluted.
Like Microsoft has.
Yeah, but they've had, you know, a fairly low cost, unlimited server capability for a long time. And I mean, WebDirect is friggin' fantastic if you think about it. And
there's nothing else like it.
So with, you know, a Citrix deployment that's customizable and very inexpensive because they support clustering and all that. But I think Matt's original point is a great point. You know, you never know the kind of customer you're going to run into next, or how successful one of your current customers is going to be, and you hate to. You know, when I was dealing with Regeneron in the early days, they were a small company. You know, 20 million a year, single FileMaker developer. Now they're multi-billion-dollar company, and it's meant millions and millions of dollars of FileMaker consulting and Oracle consulting and a lot of others. But through careful architecture, it was able to find its home and grow with them. And I just wish FileMaker would make it easier. That's all.
Thanks for the feedback on that one.
And Matt, what is your idea that you want to push to 100,000 people?
I can't tell you that. I don't really know yet. I'm trying to take like some time. I'm trying to take some time in my like personal career path right now to not like focus on many money making ideas and to just kind of be where I am with after the merger of the company. But I definitely want to launch into some other ideas. I think my goal is to have one company that's a feel-good company, something in the arts that I just love and want to support and like, and another one that makes money and can really scale and not be faced with the the normal FileMaker limits of how many users you can have on a server and how easy it is to deploy it for more people.
Well, I thought you were talking about your Oregon Health Department.
Yeah, no, that one is a really large project that had a really difficult point in the really big heyday of COVID, because it was the system that is used, the database that I wrote 11 years ago, that there's now a team of people that work on. When COVID hit, the number of users grew from like 300 to 1,300, and in a fairly short space of time, and the number of records piling in per day went from 2,000 to 30,000. Lab reports that had to be tracked down, looked at, followed up, researched, blah, 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 blah. And it straight up broke FileMaker. It just couldn't handle queries that would take a fraction of a second, took 3 minutes. When you have 300 users connected and hitting it. But
so
Oregon
that's
has
a
done
good
really
example
job.
of one that's proving your point.
Yeah. But that problem is sort of gone now because 67, 68, whatever percent of people in Oregon are now vaccinated. And so the case counts are dropping greatly and the testing is dropping greatly. So that kind of curve has crested. I mean, if there's another epidemic, pandemic, there'd be another problem.
Well, the fall's coming, so.
Yeah, but with vaccination rates continuing to grow, there would have to be like a really significant change. And also we learned a ton. So I'm looking at other problems, not that one, for this particular issue, WebDirect versus some other aspects, you know. That was kind of what I was thinking, because like, what am I going to build on? What's some other platform that I could, you know, develop on?
Smart Sheets.
Yeah, that's not limited. That also has a large free tier.
So do you remember at DevCon, Dominique would always do at the keynote out way back when that they were targeting the very small and medium-sized businesses and were not touching enterprise. Do you remember those little charts, the 3-tiered customers?
Bubble charts.
Yeah, and it just seemed to it just seemed to me that this was enterprise was not the direction they wanted to go, and I always wondered whether this was a limitation of the product itself, that they're not going to go there, or just a conscious decision that it wasn't the target that they were going after? Stephen is shaking his head here.
Yeah, it's a limitation of people's ability to understand the good that FileMaker can do for everybody. It's a personal limitation, has nothing to do with the technology, in my opinion.
FileMaker has one limitation. It's not number of records. It's not number of size of a file. It's nothing like that. It's the number of concurrent users who can work on a solution. That's the only limitation compared to other things that I've seen.
Can work on a solution.
Yeah, that can be currently logged in a solution at a given moment.
Because you can't throw more processors at it.
Exactly. That's a barrier that you cannot get past. Like there aren't circumstances where you can have 5,000 users logged into a FileMaker database, which would be trivial on some other enterprise systems. Or even 1,000 or even 500, unless it's a really, really lightweight system.
Well, the other thing is and this is a great topic of conversation, is do you think that FileMaker should sort of embed itself with best practices so that people can't just write garbage?
Yeah, there's that. I mean, we're really taking this to a different direction. And we have 15 minutes left and we have lots of topics to get through, but that's not the end of the world if we don't get to them all, because we're going to keep doing these because they're fun. Even with the best practices, Mike, I think there's still things you can't get past. The time it takes for FileMaker to create a record, just a simple thing of make a record with one field and one table, takes way longer than any of the other platforms. To do a simple query, even though it's microseconds, milliseconds, it's not when you have 300 users.
Is that because of client-server interaction?
It's because what FileMaker is a really easy to use, database that all of its tuning is for speed of development, not for speed of record creation and searches and really basic underlying, tiny little database elements.
So Brad has said, though, that they're planning to put more of that load on the server and, make FileMaker lighter, the client a lighter client is the direction. And I think that's actually pretty smart, but I don't know if that's enough.
I think that's true. John brought up a situation earlier where he did a demo for somebody in another country using FileMaker Client versus WebDirect, and FileMaker Client was straight up not usable from that distance away. Because of what FileMaker is, because it's very chatty client to server, as it has been for so long. Stephen, I remember, 25 years ago at Pre-1, you were out in Portland and we were looking at like this FileMaker server setup running on a Mac SE and looking at the reliability of the speed and connection and stuff like that. It's really not fundamentally changed from that day.
Well, and that's I think, and I'm not privy to what's happened in the last 7 years or so there, but that's a conscious decision on their part. It will never be perfect, but it is a file-based system, not unlike Oracle, right? It could be enhanced. I think Mike's comment earlier about, consciously, it's not what you don't know that can hurt you. It's what you know that ain't so that can kill you. And there's just a large contingent of people at FileMaker at that time, outside of Frank and a couple others, that don't understand that, hey, we can solve this problem of building a transactional database that's easy to use. But the FileMaker's first instinct is, let's do Bento using different technology and then run into the limitations of that technology, right? Universal updating. I work with some of the finest, I think, IT professionals in the United States sometimes, and they just sit there and marvel at FileMaker's ability to make a code change and have it propagate throughout their 200 user database effortlessly. And so obviously I'm too close to this to
FileMaker is always
Intelligently comment.
FileMaker has always reminded me, if you've ever done any woodworking, of a shopsmith. Anybody familiar with what a shopsmith
Yes.
is?
Yeah.
That's FileMaker to me. It's a
One
shop.
tool to rule them all.
Well, it's reminded me of Honda, right? I used to try and give this analogy to folks. Hey, it is a friggin' fantastic car. I bought one of the first Honda Civics in the United States, that little orange roller skate that they had that had a 3-cylinder car. And my wife drives an Acura MDX now, right? And FileMaker had the opportunity to be the Honda of the motor car business, but they decided they would stop at a high-end Honda Civic as opposed to going where the people like MySQL, for instance. How many versions of MySQL are there out there now? And how quickly do they create them? And how capable is that database? But so it's a great tool.
I want to step on the point, which is that separation, and how much of that client server with 300 people logging in and doing it is that interface where you really are, that's the dog in the fight. And if you compare it to like SQL, you are not, you don't have an interface. And so everything else, you have to build an interface. And how much of this would be beneficial if you've got 300 people logged on and doing their thing, but they're doing it on a layout that doesn't have anything fancy on it. And it's just the table and you're just scripting and maybe transactional or whatever, but
and do everything in globals.
I think the point, though, Beverly, is FileMaker has been very unique from the beginning in that it helps you manage state. Right?
Yeah.
A lot of these other solutions out there that scale to infinity don't care about state per se. They don't. Okay. They don't care if you're dealing with data that's a microsecond old, for instance.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
And it's
maybe the user session information is different for each one of those 300 people.
That's correct.
Okay.
And FileMaker does an exceptionally good job of managing state, but you pay a high penalty for that. But that is overcomable.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
In my opinion, but that's my opinion. So.
Yeah. Okay.
Mike, you said something from Brad that got me curious. Is there an actual source for that? Is it out there, or was it?
There were a series of discussions that occurred a couple of months ago where Matt was with me on this one, where Brad was meeting with small groups. And this was some of the bones of contention that were discussed. And that did seem to be something that they were looking at the time. And I think I may have heard this somewhere else too, maybe one of the FileMaker technical partner sessions as well. But it did seem like that was a direction that they were specifically heading towards, to do more stuff on the server, which means you need more powerful servers if you've got a lot of clients hitting it, and then just returning results. So
yeah.
Thank you.
Stephen, I love what you said so much. The things that you know that ain't so are what's going to kill you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but that has no connection to that conversation with Brad, so don't form that connection in your mind. Because there's definitely no one at FileMaker who believes things that just aren't true, and don't take it from me.
Certainly not.
And by that you meant we should vote now for WebDirect versus Web Add-on.
Yes, let's actually do that, and then let's spend 30 seconds each on the last 6 or 7 topics. Is there any topic that someone feels strongly about that we should discuss? Because we've got 5 minutes now, 7.
Perform script on server versus local scripts.
I know you want that one, don't you? Let's go. Let's jump to it.
I'm on it, man. So I did a DEF CON thing on this in 2016 in Vegas, where I was so lost in doing perform script on. So I'm arguing kind of against perform script on server. I had a system running for a huge manufacturing company with up to 50 sessions of perform script on server running concurrently, and it dragged the server into the garbage, and it would drag it down, and I would actually crash the scripting engine. John Thatcher, I went to him during DevCon and said, I need help. This is back in like 2014 or 15. And he helped me turn this around. He said, build a queue where you just build a bunch of process request records that you then send to a script schedule to run for you one at a time. And I did a bunch of charts about it, and it's actually, as you increase server sessions with perform script on server, the latency on the server goes up exponentially. But if you try to run those 50 scripts and it's dragging down the server, it'll take many times longer than if you just created a queue with all the parameters, a queue record, set it to a script schedule, just is running in a loop every minute, or in our case here, 2 of them running every minute, picking up the ones that haven't been processed. It will run, that same server will run those one at a time so much faster and not be slowed down. And what I've found is that perform script on server will crash the script engine, but script scheduling will not crash the scripting engine. So when it comes
to 19,
yeah. So actually, my really big question here is 19.2 had a really material change about this.
Go ahead. We were having a lot of failures in 18 until we migrated to 19.2, but now this company I'm with is basically got a policy against perform script on server. You're either running a script locally or you're running it on a script schedule, period. We didn't, because we just switched to 19.2 like around February or something. And at around the turn of the year, I forget. But after that, we had such a rough experience with the perform script on server, we're not doing it. If someone's got evidence to the contrary, I'd like to know it. But if you run things from script schedules, and you can have dozens of script schedules, they'll just hit one at a time, and it runs so much cleaner and better. This overlaps with WebDirect though, right? Because with WebDirect, you cannot do a lot of things on a local script. You have to either run perform script on server or a script schedule. But I would say push wherever you can away from perform script on server to a script schedule, which requires logging your parameters, not just pushing them to run a script. It's a little more contextual, but if you're used to the context agnostic approach to perform script on server, then you're already in mindset on the same page you need to be to do script scheduling. And that's my big argument.
Someone want to take the opposite of that?
Give me evidence. What?
Someone who wants to rebut that, other than me.
What's the inflection point?
At which point it doesn't work so well on.
Yeah, I mean, POS, with 15 users, it's awful tough to crash the script scheduler.
I'll take the opposite, because I think that for most solutions, or for small solutions, certainly, that don't have no risk of having 10 or 20 PSOS scripts on top of each other.
Right.
That PSOS is great. And it will never fail and can work reliably for years and years. But in situations where you're at, in situations like the Oregon Health Authority stuff that I've been doing, I agree. Having really heavy working scripts do not work with PSOS.
I've never built a small solution. Everything I do is these huge.
Well, that's what I'm asking. What is that inflection point? Is it 50 users? Is it 1,000 scripts a second? What?
It's not the users. It's what processes are going on.
Well, you've got to view it as calling scripts, right?
Right.
It's got to be part of that.
It's a session. A single user could initiate several sessions.
That's right.
And so what John was talking about, when you got 50 sessions, 50 PSOS going on, you've got it's like 50 people logged in.
Exactly.
You could have 2 people, but it could be, all of those PSOS scripts are starting to stack up on the server, and they're trying to all run at the same time. It's trying to do.
But that's why they've improved their scheduler, right?
Well, and maybe that they have done that. But John's solution was to just use a couple of sessions and put them. It's like the difference between parallel. Running 50 PSOS is like parallel, and running a scheduler is like serial. You can
we have
get a
two
lot more stuff
sessions.
through serially, and they don't bump into each other than you could parallel.
The script schedule is like 2 sessions, but it doesn't really have to log in because it's already running. So it doesn't have to really create a new session. It works. I don't understand at the technical level how that works, but it doesn't have to create a new session and go through all the opening script bypass maneuvers and all that stuff.
So I like John's idea of a queue. We're actually just about to deploy a queue, specific use cases inventory, where we want to update numbers in records that are potentially locked. So by having a table, which John, I'm assuming is what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
By having a table that is there to be processed, does solve additional problems. But that said, I think it's a terrific point that you just made. We might, just to make it more complicated, we sometimes do this with a robot for the debugging visibility. But if you have a queue that is, if you hit a record where there's going to be a record lock, you just say like, okay, come back later.
So we actually have multiple script schedules running the same queue. So they don't trip over each other because you got flags. But this way you get near real-time data within a minute, which is close
You're
enough.
saying that by running multiple schedules as opposed to one,
right?
You're saying that you're maybe picking up some multiprocessor effect that's making it run faster when you have 2 versus 1.
You could be processing 2 of the queue records at once because it's going to pick one up, flag it as started, so the other script schedule won't hit it, right? So while you're running one, another script schedule is running another one. You can work your way down the queue. Generally, 2 is enough, and on the average, that means they're going to hit those queue records every 30 seconds. And I've seen it happen.
I see. Because of the overlap, that's how you get more of a real-time effect.
Exactly. You just don't want to make it 10, 2 or 3,
Yeah, I was going to say, why not 3? The idea, the inventory thing that we're working on, which I think might have some general interest, is to be able, as I said, to update inventory where there's a potential lock, which is an implementation that I saw for a large Mac retailer that Steve would know about. And it was beautiful. And that was running client side on a robot that had a lot of spare Macs sitting around. And that would be just an alternative method along the same lines of what you're saying there, John.
But if you're running it right from the server, then you don't have another session running from another slave machine.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to see. I'm lazy in some ways, and I think that for a number of clients, you find something that works and perhaps deploy it again because you know that it works. I've always liked the visibility of seeing a robot running where I can just look at the screen and see that things are happening. And I have access to every single script step that's available in the entire stack, whereas server sides sometimes have subsets available. Plus, we were doing AppleScript email integration and so forth and so on. In general, though, I think it's a very creative and awesome idea to, what's it called? MacGyver, and that's a compliment, MacGyver, a solution that works around the PSOS. Certainly worth considering.
Well, the only time you need an actual robot is when you have a script step. Technically, the only reason why you need a robot is when you have a script step that won't run in a scheduled script.
Or if you're lazy, there's another good reason.
Or if you're lazy, yeah. But I wasn't going to say that, Tony, because that would reflect on you. So
I'm anti-robot because they don't really work on cloud servers, but
well, yeah, true.
Again, I give all the credit to John Thatcher for coming up with the idea that has saved my butt over and over.
Yeah, I think I really wonder. I remember you and I might have talked about this since 19.2, but I think 19.2 really addressed that, and it no longer performs greatly differently to serialize them versus parallelize them. And you can actually have multiples on top of each other that are going to perform similarly. We tried a serial method exactly like you're describing, and it didn't perform at all the way you're describing it after 19.2. I don't know if we did it wrong or what, but we could take that offline.
Is there any documentation on that you could point me to, Matt?
No, Carl did a bunch of work. Carl and David and a couple of others in our shop did a bunch of testing on that, and they found that it was just no difference in speed. And actually, it was worse than that. And so we kind of abandoned it. But
okay.
But I don't think we we didn't start with all the same points that we didn't have all the same. So we're at time. This was super fun. I actually kind of really love that we got into some deep stuff. I was almost going to ask you guys to help me solve some of my personal problems because I feel so strongly about how wonderful you all are as a group and that you can actually solve any FileMaker issue. So why couldn't you deal with psychology as well, right?
Hey,
And I'm
vote
glad
on
we
this
had some
last
good
one.
laughs.
Don't
Pardon?
forget to vote on this last one we just did.
Yes, it's not looking good for you. It's 15-1 right now for PSOS. I will for sure say that at scale, you're right. PSOS can be problematic, and I have seen Script Engine fail. And when it does, and you've got mission critical things that rely on it, they will break.
Oh,
And
you mean
it's
when it
not
fails? When it fails silently and you don't know that it failed.
It only ever fails silently.
Yeah.
When Script
exactly.
Engine fails, it doesn't send a command to users
Right.
or like a notification.
That's
So
what
we actually,
Zabbix is supposed to be for, right?
well, yeah, actually what I do now is I put a,
It does throw an error though.
pardon?
It will throw an error that you can capture.
It does, but I actually do
Let's go look for
a
it.
test script upon login that does with PSOS. And if Script Engine is not running, it returns an error. And so the user is notified that major parts of the database may be offline because PSOS is not
Nice.
working.
So there's
Oh, great.
there's a job for a robot,
Yeah.
just to run a script every couple minutes to check to see if the script engine's working.
Yeah.
Run a batch file to restart the script engine.
Yeah, but like
and
Barbara
then-
said, Zabbix can alert you so that, the administrator can know. And of course, oftentimes,
Zabbix can restart, I think, right? If the script,
If you know how to write it, yeah. If you know how
Yeah.
to write that much in Zabbix, you can do all that.
this was
Cool.
so fun. I really loved how we got into this. And there's so many topics we didn't get to and so many other ideas. We're definitely going to have more of these.
Yeah.
So be looking for this format to continue.
We could do this quarterly or something. Yeah.
Well, we have to work on your Southern accent, Matt. So
Don't Southern people find it offensive when you try to mimic their accent?
yeah, I
Cultural
guess.
appropriation, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Took me a year. I moved to Louisville. I've always lived in the front, in the north. And when I first moved to Louisville, it took me a year to be able to say Louisville without having to
Correctly.
think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When in Kentucky, do as the Kentuckians do.
And if you go to New Orleans, you have to pronounce it Nolans.
Nolans, yeah.
Nolan.
Yeah.
Yeah, what
So
what
much
about
of that in
Boston?
our life.
Boston. Boston.
Aston.
Portland.
No, Portland.
Ugh,
If
no
you come to
Portland.
Portland,
Y'all
we have
come
the river
back.
that runs through right there.
That's right.
Is
Was he
the
talking
Willamette,
about-
not the Willamette.
Portland, Maine. Portland, Maine.
Oh yeah, that's different. That's different.
Willamette. Yeah.
The Willamette River.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Matt. I really appreciate this. And
Jonathan, this was fun.
yeah, let's do it again.
We're a good team.
Let's see if we can get Christian to get us some European ones, and it's European participation, and we'll do a big transatlantic one sometime.
Yeah,
the,
just
the
kinda
group
do it
out
at a
of
good time.
Brighton puts on a good show. They get big numbers. They meet every 2 months.
Which one does?
They're called Bug, which is not the best name for a FileMaker group, quite frankly. But it's the Brighton.
It sure beats Slug.
Oh, yeah, well, there's that. It's the Brighton user group. I'll drop a link. Like I said, they put on a good show. They record, and they get 25 people, including a brave person from Claris, makes himself available for some camaraderie.
I'm aiming to have these to be 70 to 100 people as we kind of keep growing. I think beyond that, it's going to be too much, but.
The Kentucky group's always good, Matt. You can come back anytime.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, these are pretty good hours too for West Coast people. We had several of us here.
Yeah. Well, and it works for Europeans too.
Yeah, it's a good time.
Because it's not at 3 a.m.
So
Yeah,
we do.
Has anybody heard when pause tickets are going on sale?
I've been watching every day.
No
Anybody know?
inside track here.
Jonathan Allen, when are you going to have in person?
Oh, I don't know. This is just too much fun.
Yeah, but
I didn't have
you
to
could do
shave.
a
I don't have to
mixture.
shower. I could just, wear
Hey,
shorts
but-
and
Can you stand
Cosmo
up,
did that.
Jonathan?
yeah. But see,
Cosmo-
you still won't come.
Me?
Yeah, you
I
won't
might.
come. Well, you always complained it was too far to drive.
Well, it is.
So
But I haven't done any driving in a while. I'm saved up.
Yeah, we really need to get like the nerd part out, which is great if you have more people from more places. And then we have to get the social part out as well, so I can see what motorcycle Alan is riding this week. And you know, the people who, it was great when we had the in-person ones here in Portland.
Yeah, well, the problem is we're losing our venue in Louisville because Alan, who hosted it in his 3-story stone edifice in near downtown Louisville, is moving out to his mountaintop lair in Columbia, Kentucky. So, so we won't have that facility anymore.
But I do have a barn.
That could work.
We could have it in his barn in Columbia.
And it's probably closer for me.
Oh, it's way closer for you.
There you go.
Yeah, it's just that there's going to be a whole bunch of us from Louisville that are going to probably have to rent a van or something to go to meetings.
I have to do Zoom, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Zoom.
All right.
All right.
Mug link.
Thank you, everybody, and we'll see everybody next month. If you registered, that means you're on our mailing list, and we'll get notices out to you about what we're doing next month.
And next month we're doing monkey bread.
Ah, that's right. Next month, yes, we have Christian is going to be addressing us, and he's going to talk about some of the cool things that are in his plugin, in his everything but the kitchen sink plugin.
I want to see him cover every function.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we don't have that much time. I don't have enough space on my computer to record that one. But there are some really cool clusters of functions that I'm gonna see if he could present on that would be really good. That nothing else will do as easily anyway. So. So stay tuned, and we'll have some information about Christian's presentation next month, and we may have something else to go along with it. But anyway, I appreciate everybody being here this month. I see you're all dropping off like flies one at a time. So anyway, Matt, great job. We will definitely do it again.
Yes, thanks. And then, yeah, please cast your final votes and close the database, and all is good.
All right.
Have a great day, everyone.